Welcome to another edition of Ask Isaiah. It's your host Isaiah Rhodes. And on today's episode, we're breaking down the Final Four that's taking place in San Antonio, Texas. This past weekend, the matchups that we had were captivating from start to finish. You had three close games and one blowout, but because of the Cinderella story that is Loyola Chicago, that blowout really pales in comparison to how their run has put the world on notice. When you look at what Loyola Chicago has done, and we have to give a shout out to Sister Jean Dolores Schmidt, the team's chaplain, and really the face of this narrative that has really just taken over the country. Loyola Chicago defeated Kansas State 78-62. They led by 12 at the half and got up to as many as 23 in the second half, and they're in the process of winning 14 games in a row, 21 of 22. They shot 50% from three, 9 of 18, and just really took Kansas State out of their entire rhythm with their shots. Kansas State only turned over the ball 6 times, and Loyola Chicago turned it over 15 times, but because of the pace at which they were playing and the torrid shooting that they had throughout the entire second half, it really took Kansas State out of their pressure situations. And then I think they were so overwhelmed that the shock of being down by so much really took them out of the game. They started to press a little late, around 5 minutes left in the game, and it got to as much as 12. It got down to as much as 12 points with 3:54 remaining. But Chicago, there was just too much momentum on their side, and they had to finish the win out. Kansas State for the game shot 35%, 6 for 24 from three, and when you look at what Loyola Chicago has done, they're the lowest seed to make the Final Four, tying LSU in 1986, George Mason in 2006, and VCU in 2011. Now, the lowest seed to win a national title was Villanova in 1985, led by legendary head coach Rollie Massimino, and that particular Villanova team defeated the beast of the Big East in a time where John Thompson really just laid claim to the Big East. Hoya Paranoia, the Georgetown Hoyas, who were the best team in the Big East in the 1980s. They defeated that team playing a near-perfect game, shooting 79% for the game. Speaking of Villanova, they eked out a tough game against Texas Tech, 71-59. And when you had a player like Jalen Brunson, who is, by all accounts, potentially the National Player of the Year, he struggled, scoring just 15 points. But the overall play of Villanova really just took over. They didn't necessarily have the biggest lead throughout the game, but they always had separation. And Texas Tech got it to within 5 points with 4 minutes remaining. But they went on a 2-minute stretch of not scoring, and that drought really opened it up for Villanova to finish the game. Villanova shot 29 of 35 on the free throw line. Texas Tech shot 14 of 18, but their leading scorer, Keenan Evans, struggled the entire night, shooting 3 of 14. As I mentioned, that 5-point game with 4 minutes left really put pressure on Villanova to finish. But when you have players like Mikal Bridges and Brunson and just a multitude of other players, Jay Wright has so much versatility. You have Omari Spellman, you have Pascal. There's so many different players that Jay Wright can throw at you. And I think Villanova is in a position to push for another national title. This is their second Final Four in 3 years. They won the national championship in 2015-16, which is Jay Wright's and Villanova's. That's Jay Wright's first national championship. So when you look at what Villanova has done and what they can potentially do, they have an opportunity to win another national championship. Now, the other teams in the Final Four will be Michigan, who defeated Florida State 58-54, and Kansas. Now, in Michigan and Florida State's game, that was a low-scoring game, 58-54, as I mentioned, a real defensive effort. Both teams struggled from the field, shooting under 40%. Michigan shot 38%, Florida State shot 31%. But even by all accounts, the difference was a lot of Michigan's offensive rebounds down the stretch. Rebounded they out rebounded Florida State on the offensive glass 7-2, and a lot of those key offensive rebounds really turned the game. When you look at what Florida State did from the free throw line, 18 of 20, that really kept them in the game whenever Michigan tried to make an extensive run. But a lot of the story came after the game. Coach Leonard Hamilton got into a bit of a dust up with reporter Dana Jacobson. Dana Jacobson has covered a multitude of sports. She's covered the NBA on NBC. Obviously, she's covering the NCAA Tournament for CBS. She's a well-renowned broadcaster and reporter for sports. And she asked a tough question to Coach Hamilton in terms of how come they didn't foul with 10 seconds left to really extend the game and give Florida State an opportunity to win. Leonard Hamilton understood that the game was over, and from his vantage point, because the game was over, it didn't really make any sense to extend the game when you know the inevitable is happening. It was a tough moment for him and his team. They extended way further than many thought they would. This is a team that ended the season with a record of 23-11. To get to the Elite Eight is icing on the cake by a certain extent, but because they didn't finish and get the ideal opportunity that they wanted, it's a tough loss. And when you're speaking to a reporter not 10 minutes after a loss of an excruciating fashion, it's always going to be tough to compose yourself. But I felt like, considering how rough the interview was at that time, I thought that Hamilton composed himself just enough. He wasn't happy at the moment, and I thought that in the heat of the questioning, Dana Jacobson, she didn't back down. So she did her job, and Coach Hamilton did his job despite the tough situation. Now, they won't be moving on, but Michigan will go on to face Loyola Chicago. The Kansas-Duke matchup was the matchup to finish the Elite Eight weekend, and I felt like you had two blue blood college programs in Kansas and Duke University. Duke had to deal with a lot of foul trouble, especially to Wendell Carter. Marvin Bagley, because he didn't have his twin tower with him on throughout the game due to foul trouble, he really struggled to get a rhythm. He came on in the second half. He ended up scoring 16 points, 5 of 9 from the field. But he struggled at the free throw line, and Carter, because of the foul trouble, he wasn't able to provide the rebounding prowess that Bagley needed a lot of times. Bagley was the only one crashing the boards when Kansas had a bunch of different players rebounding. And when you look at what Kansas was able to do, especially in the second half, opening up the shooting, especially Malik Newman shooting 5 of 12 from 3. He ended the game with 32 points, 11 of 12 from the free throw line. He put Kansas in a position to win that game. Duke had an opportunity to finish the game. They were up 3 with about 20 seconds left. But Kansas was able to hit a huge three-pointer that sent it into overtime. And we have players like Newman able to finish for you down the stretch. Duke didn't really have an answer for him. They went into the half up 36-33, but after the second half, you saw Kansas open it up, and Duke wasn't able to finish at the basket as much as they would have liked to. When you look at how Kansas was able to get out on the fast break with steals and then transition, get a lot of open shots, that really put Kansas in position to win. They went to OT. Duke just wasn't able to finish. You had Gary Trent Jr. He had 17 points. Trayvon Duval had 20 points. But Trent Jr. only shot 2 of 10 from 3, 7 of 19 from the field. So when you have your perimeter struggling and you have Carter, who was in foul trouble, it really hampered what Duke was able to do. Grayson Allen, he struggled throughout the entire game. He went an entire second half nearly of not scoring. But he came on late at the end of the second half to really try to seal the game. He wasn't able to hit a floater to end the game, which pushed the game into OT. And after that, Duke was finished. But Duke should be in position to perform next year. They have the top 3 players in the country, including Zion Williamson. And if all things come together for Coach K, they will be a huge powerhouse. They already are a powerhouse. But when we have those blue chippers coming in next year, they should be a prohibitive favorite. But for right now, They're out. Villanova, Loyola Chicago, the Cinderella story of the year. You have Michigan, and you also have Kansas. These 4 teams will be a Final Four. The Final Four will be played next Saturday in San Antonio. The championship game will be April 2nd. This is Isaiah Rhodes. This is Ask Isaiah, and we'll be back reporting with more college basketball coming up very soon.